Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome to the show. So, Brandon, a lot of this is our favorite time of year, right? Postseason baseball. I mean, that's right up our alley.
I mean, let's think about it. Like, what other time of year can you sit in front of the TV? You got football, you got postseason baseball, and the NBA started, and the NHL started. I don't know of a single time of year that if you're a sports person and you like to compete, that it's any better than October, November timeframe.
Well, and for you get to add into that your Arctic slumber. It's perfect conditions for that because for the listeners, Brandon, when we room together in Charleston, South Carolina, it does get a little bit cold. And then Brandon would usually open the windows, have the air conditioning on, have the fan going. And I think icicles, I'm like freezing, like not even in the, I don't know how far away the bedrooms were, but I could definitely feel the chill.
Yeah, for sure. I enjoy it being kind of cool. The apartment or the house or whatever needs to have kind of its own atmospheric conditions. So in the summer here in Atlanta, there are certainly mornings that I walk downstairs and there's like condensation on the windows because it's as cold as it is inside and then as hot as it is outside. So yes, I enjoy the weather for sleeping this time of year.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've appreciated as I've gotten older. I guess that's the old bones now, but it's definitely where I've learned and appreciated the fact that, maybe he was onto something because you do sleep awesome. Better when it's cold. So
I guess so. I mean, there's a lot of studies depending upon if you look into some of this stuff, the cold therapy, and not just the recovery, the cryogenic stuff, but the true cold therapy where you're getting into a cold tub or shower. If you can kind of cycle that with hot therapy, there's quite a few studies that show benefits of that, and certainly there's I think they just call it brown, like brown matter. It's in your brain, and being cold and all that helps with some of that. So it's
interesting.
Yeah,
there's a lot of it seems like a lot of the mental toughness challenges circle around some type of like cold shower or something like that, which I've tried to do that. But I mean, I've participated in some of those before, but it's interesting. Well, speaking of October, November, this time of year, I wanted to make sure that we give a shout out to China McCarney and the Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression Foundation, who they're getting ready to start their 5th annual 100-mile November. And the goal for them is to raise $10,000. I was on the website earlier today, and I think they kind of are almost to $1,000. So I don't really, I think it's one of those things that what's really cool about it, and everybody's kind of probably participated in these types of things. It seems like I've seen on social media a bunch of different 100 miles, 75 miles for this, that, and the other. But I think everybody knows this is a really important cause to this show, is that Athletes Against Anxiety and Depression Foundation. So if you can get on, they've partnered with Flip Cause this year, where you can go and make a donation, or you can start your own fundraiser, participate in the 100-mile challenge by, walking, jogging, crawling, whatever it takes, biking to, raise that awareness. And you can find that information on AAADF.org. So www.AAADF.org to start that. And then The other thing I wanted to mention while we're talking about past guests is Brett McCabe finally came out with that book that he actually referenced on the show he did with us, which is Break Free from Suckville. Yeah. And really, really, we're both big fans of Brett McCabe, but really big fans of his books. This book, to kind of give I'll just give you a little bit of a teaser from the website. It's a book for, every competitor who thinks they suck, every parent who wants to ease the pain of struggle, and then every business person who compares themselves to others, which I think everybody can appreciate, just those three. There was more things. It was like, for a lot of other people, but, competitors that think they suck. I mean, how many times as a coach you've heard players coming off the field making that statement?
It's amazing. And I think, we've talked about it. There are things that we say to ourselves that you would never say to a friend or anybody else, really. Kind of a funny story. So I'm at the CrossFit gym about, I don't know, man, this is probably 2.5 years ago. It was pre-COVID stuff. And we had a new member, and she's super sweet. Like, she's just one of these just, down home, sweet, doesn't really have a bad thing to say. I don't know if she curses at all. And I'm over in the corner. I'm sweating. I'm feeling sorry for myself. Like, I'm just being a baby, a big baby. And this is probably her, I don't know, third or fourth workout maybe. And it included some running to where you had to kind of, leave whatever position you are in at the gym or inside to go run. Well, she comes walking by as I happen to be talking negatively to myself. And I basically said, hey, stop being an effing baby and let's get to work. And I said it out loud as she's walking by.
Right.
And God bless her. Hey. She looked at me like, I'm okay, then let's get to work. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Wow. Note to self. Don't sign up for the 5:30 class. Out with this a-hole ever again. But I did at the end of the class. I went over and I said, hey, look, I'm sorry. I was, if you thought I was talking to you, I was just I was being a baby and talking to myself. But to that point, I don't know a whole lot of people that at some point in time have not shown themselves the grace or the compassion that we would show others. And so I think. Yeah, because you wouldn't have apologized to yourself. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing is, I think it's an excellent point, because if you were to have said some of the bad stuff that, knowing you, I know you were saying to yourself, you didn't, to her, it hurt you thinking, oh man, I hope she didn't think that I was talking to her. Right. It was okay if I was talking to myself.
Right. Which as I, and it's funny because as I have kind of gone down this path with you and with our guests, it's interesting to see how my mindset has evolved a little bit, for sure, in terms of, I think my coaching style has gotten a lot different. There's a lot to it. It's been interesting. But
you find yourself, I think, at least I find myself really paying attention to the words that I am saying to myself from a standpoint. The thing that keeps resonating with me was, and this wasn't even a guest, it was just, Trevor Moad, who, God rest his soul, has passed away. In his book, It Takes What It Takes, where he's talking about that idea of, the negative thoughts being 4 times stronger than positive thoughts, and spoken negative thoughts like a 10 times multiplier. But that, like, if I'm on a run or something like that, or if I'm starting to have any negative thoughts come in, I'll literally like start to speak positive thoughts. So I keep saying to myself, like, well, geez, like if I'm already starting at a deficit as far as positive thoughts versus negative thoughts and the power that they have on us, then I want to make sure I'm trying to speak the positive thoughts. And so I'll be like, hey, good job. Like, and who knows, like if, I'm sorry if you live on the running route that I take from my house, because you've probably heard a lot of weird conversations, or I'm probably known as the guy that like talks to himself as you're going by.
It probably would beat me to where my positive thought would have to be like, well, hey, look, I just passed that baby that can't walk, or
yeah.
Hey, oh, look who's scooching now. Your boy is tearing it up right now.
Yeah. So it's but it is true. It's one of those things I think that we all, if you pay attention and kind of go back and do that, debrief or that self-reflection at the end of the day. And that's one of the things I would add in there would be, how did I talk to myself today? How did I think to myself today? It might not always be verbal, but it could be just the way that you just allowed negative thoughts to creep in to your head.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, speaking of some of that stuff, are you still doing the meditation? I know after Alan Jager's interview.
It's kind of crazy. So I am still doing it. And not to have another commercial for the Whoop strap, like we did with I think China.
Yeah.
But it's crazy to see that data. So even some of the Garmin watch I have measures like stress, what it considers stress, and usually I think it's mainly based on an algorithm where they're looking at how your heart kind of spikes throughout the day. So like when I work out, that's considered stress, but then there are other times throughout the day. I'll give you an example. I was at one of Knox's football games a couple of weeks ago, and the watch kept telling me, hey, you need to calm down and have a breathing exercise. And so I did, and it helped. But I'm still meditating my recovery. I've seen significant improvement with my heart rate variability. I've seen some noticeable changes in the way that I breathe. Especially, it's interesting to see how my body reacts as I start to meditate. It's almost like it knows what's coming. And so it's interesting. It's almost like it allows me to relax and go through the exercise now, where when I first started doing it, for sure, my mind was fighting it. Like it fought it hard.
Yeah.
It was almost like, hey, what are you doing? You don't have time to be doing this.
You don't have time to be practicing nothing.
Right.
I mean, that's the, I was reading, and I'll butcher this, but the Tao Te Ching or whatever the book.
The Tao Te Ching, yeah.
Tao Te Ching, yeah. So sorry to Alan for butchering that. But it was what struck me was a couple of things about that book, and I'm only like, it's really broken up into short segments, but I'm only probably about like 25 or 30 in, I guess segments or chapters in or whatever. But I love, there was a line in there. It said, practice not doing and everything will fall into place. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it was and then there was that line resonated with me. And then the other line that resonated, and it was really a series of lines. I was actually trying to find this in preparation for the show, but it was talking about, if you don't look at things as good, then there's not things as bad. Like it was this whole, like, and you can take this into different levels of like, if you don't label things and everything is just the same, like we just did it a minute ago, negative thought and positive thought. Like if you just practice this idea of letting things come in and then move on or whatever, then you don't get caught up in, well, I'm negative thinking or I'm positive thinking.
For sure. And absolutely. And it kind of goes back to like we've talked about before with expectations, right? I mean, it's like I tell my kids, and I think we had mentioned it before. If they happen to find a $5 bill just laying on their bed, would they be excited?
Right.
Hell yeah, they would be excited.
Yeah.
They would be ecstatic. And they would also know that it wasn't theirs and they should probably give it back to me. But they had no expectation of finding that. Now, if I left $80 on their bed and they were expecting 120, they'd ask, where the hell's the other 40? Like,
right.
And that's kind of how I look at some of this stuff is we talk a lot about controlling the controllable. Certainly mind, body, breath is controllable. Practicing with intention, as Alan says, and really a lot of our guests have said, hey, all of the things that we're talking about are great tools and they're great theories, but you have to practice it, right? And you have to practice it with intent or with intention. And I think along those same lines, it's not having expectations. It's like you said, not giving weight to good or bad or however you're looking at a situation. If you go into the situation curious and neutral, it's a completely different mindset than going in either, super hyped or being discouraged that you happen to do it or whatever. If you can find the curiosity in every situation, I think your mindset is in a totally different spot.
It's a really, I think this whole idea of labeling and what you're saying there is so important. And I literally hate the phrase, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. But when I'm reading this book, I'm learning that in reality, it really is what it, like, for sure. If we just take it as it's just a thing, like, and you think about the impact that can have on an athlete, for example, right, or a business person. We've had them all have talked about this in some degree. I'm thinking right away when I just said business person, I'm thinking about Nina, when she was talking about the fact that if that business person who's got this, challenge that has now, come upon their company and mm-hmm. they have that attitude of like, this is a great opportunity for us. This is something, how are we going to adjust to this? And they don't come into it thinking like, oh, we're doomed. This sucks. This is the worst or whatever. How much more impactful they are. We've heard Dr. Mo talk about, Tony Finau and some of the guys, like we were saying, is instead of looking at this as like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just choked away that lead and now I have to go into the playoffs, is this is a great opportunity for me. I get an opportunity to continue to compete today or whatever. And I think about, speaking of Brett McCabe, I think about, and I'm glad we're on this topic because it really leads into a little bit of a area I want to go to. So in his original book, and people have heard me talk about this book, The Mindside Manifesto, the urgency to create a competitive mindset, whether it's Carol Dweck's book about mindset or this book, I have told people and told Brett this himself that this has become my kind of go-to book mm-hmm. that I get graduates because it's just got so much stuff in there. And one of the things that you were just talking about is intention, mm-hmm. And how you kind of apply that to things. And in the book, Brett mentions in this book, The Mindside Manifesto, he mentions the psychological barriers to success. And I'm going to read this little quick quote. He says, it's not about developing the perfect game plan for success. Rather, it is about having the psychological maturity to develop plans for when adversity, mediocrity, and frustration hit. having a trusted plan and the ability to shift focus away from the problems that are occurring and onto the steps to persevere through all challenges is what defines champions. It's what we were just talking about. Like, if I don't look at these things as anything more than just a situation, and that's probably the best way to describe it, is it's just something that's happening, something that's going on, and now I have to use my plan and get through this, or at least use my plan and get past this moment in time. But in order to get past that moment in time, I have to be in the moment to do it.
For sure. And I think too, you have to have perspective, right? And there's some, and it just came up not that long ago, and it was really interesting because I was just having this conversation with somebody about 2 or 3 days ago, because they had asked me about just my general outlook on life, right? And I said, I'm not sure when it started, but it started a long time ago. And not to be morbid, but I always looked at life as when someone's standing over me giving a eulogy. Is this really going to matter? Like, is this the thing that really they could be like, he was this, he was that. Some people may say he was a real asshole. All of it, and I'll own it all. But are they really going to say he was a decent guy, except for that one time in a baseball game where, right?
We needed him. I'm glad he
Thank
died.
God that dude died. Yeah, I couldn't handle watching another non-competitive at bat. So I think there's and like I said, it just came up the other day in like the Daily Stoic. They were talking about, someone had said something in a similar. It was obviously a much more concise and flowery type of delivery, but the bottom line is, when we're all said and done, is this thing that I'm fretting over, is it really making a difference in my life or in anybody else's life? Is it really? And that,
it's the same thing with Brandon of one of the exercises I have people do, especially if they're, looking at things in that kind of a negative, like everything's the most crucial thing, right? Is I have them do like, if you start with a pen on a piece of paper and you just start drawing, like, just moving from left to right, and you start thinking about your life as far as the ups and the downs, everybody's life is going to look like the EKG. Sure. Everybody's going to have the peaks and valleys of it. But with every valley, there's usually a peak that follows. There's usually some blip on the radar. I saw a guy talking about, 10,000 years ago, what fear was like for people who were living, right? It was like this, you're afraid you're going to fall through the ice. You're afraid you're going to get eaten by a tiger. You're afraid about, all of these things. It's death was mostly the reason that you were afraid. Was there was a lot of things that could kill you. Sure. And so to your point, now what happens though is that people tend to take the small, I don't want to be critical of anybody who, is taking their work really seriously. But to your point, like that business presentation you botched or whatever, it's tough, but you're going to make it. It's not going to kill you. Like it's not
going to kill you. And guess what? No one that's in that room is going home to talk about it. So all the stuff that you think, the impact that you think that you have.
Yep.
Like, hey, pump the brakes a little bit, homeboy. Like, do you think you're that important? I mean, that's to me at the end of the day, kind of part of it.
Yeah.
How important do you really think you are?
Right. Well, let's see. And I always attribute this to my dad. And I don't know if he's the one who told me this or not, but he gets credit for anything. Sure, I can't remember the person that said it. So he always comes across as like, really being a very wise
guy.
Super wise guy. But I heard someone say one time, they said, you'll worry about what other people think of you until you realize how little they do.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's like, it's the truth. Like we have, what is it that causes that anxiety and frustration and stress at work is I'm worried what my coworkers are going to think, or I'm worried about my boss is going to think, or whatever. And you start to put that, but I loved in this story about the 10,000 years ago, the guy said, there's a Polish saying, and I wouldn't, even if it was written down for me, I wouldn't attempt to, I would not attempt to try to read it. But it was a Polish saying that was just simply one phrase that says, there is no tiger. Just when you have those things happening in your life, just remember there is no tiger. Like there's nothing that's going to kill you about this particular moment. Now, some of you that are working with like high voltage electric or whatever, listening to this podcast are like, well,
is that a big demographic for us?
It might be.
Hey, if you're listen, let me put this out there. If you're working with high voltage right now, turn us off. Pay attention to what the hell you're doing.
Yeah. The guy's like, I like to listen to you guys because it puts me in a
good head spot.
Yeah. There's nothing. It's like basically listening to white noise. Yeah. So no, but I think it's really interesting. And that's for true. Sure. It's a lot of good, but so for you guys listening, you electric union guys,
union workers, they're huge demographic. Had no idea.
Then understand.
Hey, here's my dad joke. I'm shocked that we have that demographic.
That's very good. It's very good. So anyhow, that's really good. So another thing, as we're kind of talking about some of the things and how everything connects is, we talk about this idea of not labeling things, and being in that moment is overcoming all of those different obstacles. Like, as we continue to talk, Doug Little, I was listening back to some of the interview with Coach Little from last week. And I thought it was so important that, he kind of echoed what we've talked about numerous times on the show, though, about like how that differentiator between elite success, all of those like winning, attitude, mindset, or whatever, comes down to mental toughness. It comes down to how well this person can, perform at their best when it matters the most. And not everybody can do that. And it is a differentiator. I mean, we've talked about this before, and I told Doug on the show that's why I kind of went down that road of mental performance coaching is as a coach, and we've both been doing that for a while. You realize there's so many people that just can't get out of their own way. Like if they could just get out of their own way, they would be able to soar to new heights or whatever. And it's one of those things that, I don't know. I thought a lot about that, and about the fact that, when you think about mentally tough people, it's the more mentally tough somebody is, the more they want, kind of a little bit of what like Dr. Mo talks about, invite the challenge. But if you really think about that, they love when it's tough. They love when the conditions are tough. They love when it's raining out or whatever, because they know everybody else is going to fall behind.
They're miserable. Other people, if I'm mentally tough, I know that while I may not be comfortable, I'm sustainable.
Yep.
And that these people are they're in their head and they are not worried or focused upon the task at hand, for sure. And I think what's interesting too, John, you talk about, if we were to label what you just described in terms of somebody that is able to get out of their way in a big situation and just be there in the situation and allow themselves to be present and allow themselves the opportunity to fail, right? I mean, that at the end of the day, it's the courage in a big situation to fail that allows you to go out there and play unencumbered. And those dudes and those girls, and whether it's sports or business that you make a big decision, whatever it is, we call those people clutch, right? They come up clutch.
Absolutely.
They come up and they do something that everybody needed them to do. And most of the time they do it because they embrace the challenge, like you said, and their confidence doesn't come from something that their confidence comes from the training they've put in. Their confidence comes from the mindset that they're in, the breathing techniques, the fact that they know that it's miserable out, and they've got the determination to not let it bother them. And everybody likes to use, the word like rent free or whatever in their head. We used to call it being in somebody's kitchen, but those people that are of clear mind and even in stressful situations can control themselves, more times than not, they're going to succeed more than they fail, but they're not scared to fail.
Yeah, and they do a good job of what we were just talking about a minute ago about not labeling any moment as something it's not. Like, it is a basketball game. It is a baseball game. This is another at-bat in this baseball game. Like, the guys that can look at that and truly stay in the present moment and not allow themselves to think in the playoffs, for example, this is the bottom of the ninth. This is the most important AB I have of this game. If they can just get the mentally tough guys and the ones that are really disciplined and at that elite mindset, they look at this as, look, no matter what happens, this is going to be a good thing. I'm either going to succeed in this AB or I'm going to I'm going to learn. I'm going to not maybe succeed, but I'm going to get something out of that. That will be success in and of itself. And so those guys are the ones that are more prepared to, like you said, they live for those moments because, and I can't emphasize that enough. And for you listeners, just watch it on TV. Like, there are the greats, the ones that you've seen over the years that we would put up on that pedestal. The Tom Brady's. I think of Brady, for example. The dude, when you watch him on the bench, looks no different in the first quarter than he does, or looks no different in the late, 0-2 going out there than he does on the, in the first quarter or whatever. It's just like, okay, this is it. What do we got to do? I'm going to commit to my process. I'm going to revert to my training. I'm going to sink to that level of training and be successful because I'm not making this moment any bigger than what it has to be.
And that's where my confidence comes from. I'm confident that, not because of the situation I'm in now, I'm confident in that I've done everything that I could do to prepare myself for the opportunity that presents itself today. And that's the confidence.
Yeah. And so stay on that, because that's the last thing I had written, because when I saw that Brett's new book, Break Free from Suckville, was out, I, of course, went back to some of my highlighted points in Mindside Manifesto. And one of the things he says in there is a person who lacks the self-confidence to be great and the self-confidence to overcome challenges invariably looks for fixes and solutions from others rather than searching for the answers within. So they're the ones that are like, first of all, they typically are the ones who blame other people or other things, other conditions and stuff for their failures. But they also are like, just tell me how to do it. Just, they're the ones that, as we say all the time, is, when people have adversity hit, they either get fascinated or they get frustrated. They either get fascinated and think, what else can I do? How can I figure this out or whatever? And some of them just get frustrated and they give up easier. But I think that really comes back to what you were talking about earlier, is the confidence piece. But that confidence comes from understanding that it's about me being able to stay in the moment, commit to the plan, and just really make sure that I'm not making this any bigger than what it has to be.
For sure. And we heard Dr. Mo, since we're going to kind of do a review on some of these, but we heard Dr. Mo talk about it, right? They go to Augusta National and play. They don't go to the Masters.
Right.
They're, and that's not, and even if it is, it's not a big deal, but that's not really a mind trick. That's just, hey, it's just the reality. Course.
Exactly.
Right. It's the course we're going to play. There's nothing different than that. There's nothing more to it than that. It's going to be a challenge. and I'm going to show up curious and ready to play, and we're going to see what happens.
Well, and you said something to me a few, I don't know, months ago or whatever, when I was kind of getting back into running, and I was saying that, what was interesting to me was I had not ran in a while, but when I first started running, it would be like I would have to run, walk, even to just do like 2 miles or whatever the case would be. But even after a long break in action of running, I had gone back out one day and ran, and I think I did like 4.5, 5 miles or something like that. Humble brag. But I
that's awesome.
So but I, was able to log mileage that in the very beginning I would have never been able to do, especially after 3 or 4 months off of it. But you said that's because you've done it before. Like, and there is something to be said for that. It's like when you've done that, when you've kind of conquered that, hard thing that you were dreading at work, when you've kind of conquered some of those things. And trust me, the first time you were trying those things at work, that project you were working on or whatever, it might not have looked great. That presentation in front of the board might not have went off really smoothly. But the more you continue to try and attempt it, and then you finally accomplish it, once you've done it and your mind's eye can see it, then all of a sudden it just makes it so much easier to do.
Well, for sure. And think about what we're talking about a lot tonight. It's how to overcome fear, how to believe in yourself or have the courage to do some of these things. Because what you're talking about there is yes, I've done it. So the fear is stripped away. There's nothing that scares me about going out and accomplishing this now. And that's where the preparation comes in, that if you've done what you're supposed to do and preparing for whatever it is, there may still be some anxiousness and excitement, but it's not fear.
Right.
Because you've done everything that you need to do, right? There was fear when the tiger could get you. There was fear in all of those things because you could prepare all you wanted to. And if that mug was hiding in the bushes, you're done.
You're done.
And so the things that we do today, the preparation that we do today is really more about erasing that fear. And so that the energy you feel when you go into whatever the endeavor is a little more excitement and maybe some nerves, but it's excitement, energy. It's not, bubble guts and I'm going to throw up because I'm not prepared.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of this that you're talking about lies.
And the fear, what's the acronym there? Is false evidence appearing real, right? It's the, it's we are the ones
you say so, Gary.
All of that in. I hate to keep going back to. I feel like I've said this statement now 4 different times about we're the ones who label it, but we are like we're the ones who, and we've talked about this before on the show. Is like you can label it excitement, you can label it as nervousness. Sure. It's up to you. Same physiological effects on the body or whatever. Right. It's the same thing with all of these things. It's like that speech you're giving at work, that big game that you have coming up, we are the ones that take that false evidence appearing real. We're the ones who put that label on these things. They're like, oh, it's something's hiding in the dark or whatever. But I just think kind of to put a bow on that, I think it's really important that people understand that are listening to the show is really think about what we were just talking about there. Like, if you believe something's good, then that means something's bad. If you believe, like, you can really approach things as like, okay, it just, and going back to the phrase I hate the most, but it is true, I guess, is it is what it is. It's just something you have to deal with. And, you're going to commit to your process, whatever that process is. Speaking of which, and this will be the last thing we will have time to talk about tonight, but speaking of postseason baseball, the Braves, I mean, this is one of those things that is, it's like where you see, and why we love any of these postseason playoffs, sports is you see mental toughness really raise itself.
You do. And you wonder, like, again, I'm a lot more curious to see now how, and I'm maybe not I've always been curious of it, but I guess maybe I'm a lot more cognizant or aware of how players are responding.
Yeah.
So you got the Braves that on was it Tuesday night? They're up 5-2. They're going into they're 5 outs away from basically wrapping this thing up. I mean, It's going to be 3-0, and you still have a bullpen game to go for the Dodgers.
Yep.
You're in really good shape as the Braves go, and you give it up. You give it up, and it's not to go too deep into the baseball aspects of it because that would take another hour, but it was really interesting to see how. So we're recording this Thursday night. They're playing right now. I don't know what the score is, but Wednesday night they bounce back.
Yeah,
they go up 5-2 again. And I love how the man upstairs provides those opportunities. Yes. They're right back to where it's 5-2 again, just like it was the night before. Right. How are you going to learn from this?
That's right.
From the night before, and how do you respond? And how they responded was, hey, let's put 4 more on the board.
Yeah, let's go ahead and finish this.
Let's finish this. And move on to the next game. And what again is really interesting to me is a lot of folks may not realize the Braves were up 3-1 last year in the NLCS. They are exactly where they were this time last year against the Dodgers. 3-1 lead, and looks like they're going to win. They then have a bumbleheaded base running error. And I remember looking at Knox, and he thought I was crazy. And I said, the series is over. I said, the Braves will not win this. And he's like, what are you talking about? I said, I've been doing this long enough. I know that when something like this happens, it's over, because you could see their mental makeup. It just wasn't there. And so to see them kind of bounce back last night like they did, it was pretty awesome.
It's one of those few things outcomes wise that I remember from our college baseball days, from a standpoint of, we always talk about how you remember the trips and the time spent around the teammates and all that more than anything. But to your point, one of the things I always reflect back on is when we go down to Florida State, the one year before we upset them 3-0 down there. The year before, we go down there and have them beat 4-3, I think.
4-3, and they walk it off.
Yeah. And they walk it off. And I always tell people the difference of those two games was when we're winning 4-3, we're out counting, right? It's like you start in your mind, you're going out and you're like, oh, we only have 4 more outs to go. We only have 5, 3 more, whatever. And that's where things start to fall apart, because it's very outcomes focused. It's very futuristic in thought, instead of staying in the moment and just pitch to pitch mentality. And they go bunt, base hit, ties it, another base hit. Let's be honest.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And I think it's so many times those good teams, and back then they were an elite baseball.
Oh yeah.
team.
They were ranked number 1,
right. Right. But it's interesting how we as competitors give, in my opinion, too much credit to the people across, like make them earn that. Right. And I feel like that first year that you're referencing, everybody on the team, I think, was shocked that we were up 4-3.
Right.
Like
we were competing against
this team that is a powerhouse. And are we really going to be able to win?
Right.
And as soon as it started to go one way in their favor, momentum wise, it was like we all expected it. Yep. And it was over. And that's why I was telling someone the other day, what really impressed me 2 weeks ago when Texas A&M beat Alabama, it wasn't that Texas A&M beat them because Texas A&M has plenty of talent. It was, I think, almost everybody in the country, when Alabama went into halftime down by 17, thought, that's okay. It's Alabama.
Yeah.
And then Alabama ties it, and everybody's like, see, this is exactly what we thought. And A&M had an answer. A&M believed, like, hey, that's okay. We've got an answer for this. And that, to me, that mental makeup was more impressive than the win. They don't win without it. But every time that you think it's going to go one way because you've just seen it so many times, they said, nah, not tonight. And that to me is that's what makes a win like that special. It's knowing what those kids kind of had to overcome mentally to perform the way that they did.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, and this is why I love sports so much, it's so fascinating to me to watch these teams, like even in Alabama, some of these elite teams, and you see this all the time during March Madness, is I don't care how good mentally tough your team is. And it's funny, we're talking about Alabama and Brett McKay because he's part of helping develop that mental toughness they have down there. But I don't care how mentally tough it is. If you can get a team like that on the ropes or whatever, there's a certain point of every one of those ball games where the pressure really amplifies onto that team. Like, especially in March Madness when the stakes are so high, like that's why we see the 12 seed beat the 3 seed or whatever. Like it's all of a sudden now, if you can just hang in there, just hang in there. Yeah, because now all of a sudden you're playing with house money as the underdog. And all of a sudden, all of that pressure from everybody goes on to, because that's the first thing that those teams go to is, what happens if we lose? What happens? I can't believe we're losing to this team.
If I walk onto campus tomorrow and we lost to Chaminade.
Right. Yeah.
They're going to laugh at me. And it goes back to, like we talked about earlier, is don't worry about what other people are doing.
Right.
They aren't at your practice.
Yeah.
They don't know what kind of preparation you put into it. This other team wants to beat you. You have a giant bullseye on your back. Now let's get to work.
Yeah. Go back, trust your training, trust the fact that you got better talent, you have better, all of that stuff. But it's so fascinating to me because some teams will take those few punches and then all of a sudden, it's like I was telling somebody, I was watching a football game a couple weeks ago, and there was like a lesser talented team playing a more talented opponent. And I was saying, the longer you let that lesser talented team hang in there, you're just asking for trouble, because that's why as coaches, we always talk about put them away while you can, keep your foot on the gas pedal.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as you let that happen, we've seen it too many times as players and as coaches where everybody starts getting nervous about the outcomes. And if only you could stop everything and just pause it. But momentum doesn't work that way. You pause it, and then all of a sudden you say, you know what, guys, let's all take a big, deep breath here and reset. So anyhow.
And you can't, and you know this too, right? Is like, we can't, as a player, when you turn it off, especially when you're younger, when you turn it off and you lose that focus, it's not coming back. It's very rare to,
you have to really make a conscious effort. And that's why you got to prepare for it. You got to prepare for the fact that it may happen. And when it does, what's my mechanism going to be to get back into it? Is it going to be a reset breath? Is it going to be some, physical thing? But I've got to be able to recognize that I'm out of control, that my focus is starting to wane, starting to think about the outcomes. I'm starting to think about all these things, and be able to dial yourself back into it and understand, okay, let's get back into be in the moment to win the moment. So, all right, man. Well, that is all the time we got for tonight, but good conversation. And, maybe the Braves will go ahead and take care of business tonight. So
we're going to find out here shortly.
All right, brother.
All right, brother.
I'll talk
Be
to you
good.
soon.
All right. See you.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.